just a brief intro. I'm here to talk about fundraising and fundraising tactics. I'll give you a little bit sort of anecdotes and some of my own thoughts. I don't have any slides today because fundraising is honestly something that's just, it's so idiosyncratic that, I'll just give you some tips and things like this. You can take from it what you want, but that's up to you. But one thing about it is that all throughout the program, that's perfectly fine with me. It's not a problem. I just been up here and doing my best for 45 minutes or whatever to answer these, but in total of about 200 companies over the course of about 15 years. Over the course of the next 5.5 years, from 2008 to 2014, we ended up working with 470 companies, and I took equity in about 220 of them, so that accelerated quite quickly. My portfolio consists of now about 242 companies right now. Early stage, not all at early stage, but they came into the portfolio at early stage across about 35 countries and 6 major areas. So those are agricultural, ecological technologies. I hate naming these things, but people always ask. Biomedical, kind of like IT, software, more getting into like ML and AI kind of stuff right now. Energy, materials and manufacturing, I think that's 5, and then social ventures. So that's kind of, my portfolio is pretty broad in that respect. So throughout it all, I've learned how to raise money myself. I've learned how other people should raise money, and perhaps more importantly, I've learned how people should not raise money. And there's a lot of things that you can learn about how not to raise money. So I think the first sort of tidbit I'm going to throw out there is listen to people who have raised money and who also, invest money, because they're not telling you this stuff because it warms their hearts or because they're or they're to hurt you or anything like this. Honestly, the advice that most people will give you is just good advice born out of good experience. Now, it could be anecdotal, so you have to be a little careful of that. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's representative or exemplary, but it's usually sort of comes from a good place. And I'll give you some of that experience. I'll give you, I've interacted with a large number of entrepreneurs. I tend to have sort of deal flow of around 300 or so startups a year, and for roughly the last 10 years. So I've seen a few thousand, roughly, I don't know what the actual number is, but a few thousand roughly, somewhere in the 2,000 to 4,000 range, certainly, startups, and almost every single one of them is interested in how do I raise money, and so I'll give you a little bit about some of my thoughts on that based on my experience, which is anecdotal. It's still anecdotal, even though it's a large number. It's still anecdotal because it's born out of some sample bias. People come to me, they know certain characteristics about me, or they don't know certain characteristics about me, whatever it happens to be. Over the years, I've changed. The environment has changed. So this isn't necessarily like great data, but it's a lot of anecdotes. But a lot of anecdotes isn't data. So just be careful about that. So ask your questions. I'll answer them to the best of my ability, but I'll kind of start off with a few tidbits, and then we can go from there. All right. Any questions at this point? Okay. All right. So the first thing that I tell people about raising money is this. Most people think, this is sort of implied about entrepreneurs who are raising capital. It's generally true. In fact, I've never found it not to be true, at least in early stage, all right, for first-time entrepreneurs. It's very often thought, I think it's fairly universal, it's that I need the money. Like there's an investor out there, and I have to do everything I can to get that money. So I might have to make adjustments in my plan. I might have to make some sort of modifications to how my arrangements or the offer of the deal or anything like this. Okay. In other words, you are seeking the capital. They are not seeking you. That's bullshit. The way that an economy works, more specifically the way that financial markets and institutions work, is that we have people in the world, and we're going to split them into two groups. The first group we're going to call borrower, anybody know?
Lenders.
Borrower lenders, and
Investor, investee.
that's one. So actually, so there's borrowers and then there's lenders, right? So what we usually refer to them as borrower spenders and saver lenders. Okay? Saver lenders are people who have money. They may not have a lot of money, but they have enough money to be able to put it into some sort of investment. A lot of people are saver lenders. People who have bank accounts are saver lenders. Because people with bank accounts, deposit accounts, put their money into a bank, they keep it in the bank for a while, the bank lends it out. And that's how the bank makes money. And, you know, if you've got the right account, maybe that's how you make a little bit of money too. Probably not a lot, right? But you still make something, right? That makes you a saver lender. Most people are also borrower spenders. That means they borrow money. They take loans, they take investment, borrow money from a friend, whatever it happens to be, right? Most people are both. In the context of financial markets and institutions, however, we can formalize that a little bit more. We can say that that we're just going to say that there's a divide between the people who need to borrow the money, people like entrepreneurs, and people who have the money, who have saved the money, and who can lend it. Okay, those are the investors. All right, and that divide is not particularly clean, but it's a good way of doing it. And it's not like people who invest money don't necessarily borrow money either, right? For example, right? And I'm sure you've lent some of your friends money or something like this at some point along the way. Maybe they haven't paid it back. So maybe you should go to them first for capital raising. But the basics of this are that there are these two groups of people, all right? They need each other. They absolutely need each other. So it's not the case that as an entrepreneur seeking to raise capital that you are in a weaker position to raise capital. You can be in a weaker position, and I will tell you that most entrepreneurs are in a weak position, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But that doesn't mean that as a broad class of people, entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs who are raising capital are in a weak position, innately. The saver lenders, the investors, they need people. They need intellectual capital. You need financial capital. They need intellectual capital. They need the time and effort. They need your mind. They need your ideas to be able to invest their money into so that they can grow their cash. They can grow their investment. They can't do that without you. The difference, however, and this is what it comes down to fundamentally, is that investors have something which is fairly fungible. Fungible means that it's kind of swappable. Like $1 from him is the same as $1 from me. It doesn't make any difference that it's coming from him or me. Okay? That's sort of true of investors. It's mostly true of their money, right? But it's not entirely true of the relationship. Put that aside for a second and say that, let's assume for a moment, just for now, and we're only going to assume this for about the next 20 seconds, that investors' money is fungible. That, in other words, it doesn't make any difference who the money's coming from. $1 is $1 is $1. And so as a consequence, entrepreneurs think, well, I just need money. I don't care who I get it from. I don't need to seek somebody out in particular. I just need money. If I can get the money, then I can do what I need to do. And as a consequence, however, the investors, there's this culture that has developed, and the investors sit there and go, well, you need my money. And so I do care about where I'm putting my money. So I am going to be picky. So you have to prove to me that you're worthy. No. Because investors aren't just piles of money. I haven't met an investor yet that's just made up of money. They don't just have piles of money. Now, some investors are like that. Some investors are effectively like that. Some investors will just sort of sit there and they'll be like, yeah, sure, I'll write checks all day. Right? If you're a good company, I'll write a check all day. But I'm not going to give you anything else. All I'm doing is giving you a check. That's it. Generally speaking, that is not the kind of investor that you want. I'm sure you've heard this term, but the term that's used is smart money versus dumb money. Smart money refers to, dumb money refers to money that just doesn't have anything that goes along, it's just money. Sometimes it can actually be harmful. I mean, it seems neutral, but sometimes it can be very harmful. Smart money is the money that comes from people who understand your business. They understand, they may not understand it entirely, but they understand generally what your business model is, and or they understand what your market looks like, and or they can at least help connect you with the right people, etc., etc. So it's not just money. And you should be picky about that. You need to be picky about that. Just like they're going to be picky about you. And if they're not picky about you, you shouldn't want their money. If they don't, people ask me all the time, they say, well, you know, how do I get through all of this? They're going to ask me a bunch of questions. I don't necessarily know all the answers. Well, no, you don't know all the answers. You should know some of the answers, and you should know how to think through most of the answers. And then the rest of the answers you should be able to know how to figure out. And if you come up with a question that an investor is asking, and they say, what about this? Either it's a dumb question, and you should walk away from the table right then and there, or it's a good question, and if you don't know the answer to it, you should say to yourself, well, you know, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's a good question, and I'd love to learn the answer to it, and it seems like here's how I can figure out the answer. Like, should I have known the answer to this question? Then maybe I should walk away from the table and go figure out the answer to this question. If I shouldn't have known the answer to this question, but it's something that I can figure out, then maybe we can sit down and talk about it a bit. Or if it's something that I shouldn't even know the answer to because we haven't gone far enough down this path, then I'm going to tell you how going down this path, taking your money, taking your advice, taking your network and your resources, and using them along with all these other resources, and me and my team and my intellectual resources and things like this, I'm going to help figure out the answer to this question. So there's always those kinds of things. But you need to be picky. Now, how can you be picky? Well, the answer is, you got all your shit together. You know what you're doing. You don't have to know everything, but you should know everything up to getting that money. You should be prepared to take the money. Most entrepreneurs are not prepared to take the money. The vast majority of entrepreneurs are not prepared to take the money. I even said this last time, I think. Jennifer, I told a story about the blue books, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll tell the story again. Though I don't know if all of you were in the room last time, but I'll say it again. All right? So it's not a story so much as an abstraction, but it has sort of experience and reality as a foundation to it. What I tell entrepreneurs all the time is when they're pitching, this is about pitching, but it's actually about something broader than that. Here's what you do. And Jennifer, by the way, I don't, maybe some of you, the rest of you did this too, but I know that she took this to heart, and she went out and started doing this. So here's a basic story, and I'm going to tell it in an abstract way that sort of relates to a particular concrete example, but it's not specific to that example. The example that I'm going to give is, let's say you're trying to build an app. Right? A lot of you might be trying to build an app. So let's say you're trying to build an app, and let's be a little bit more specific, which isn't very specific. Let's say that you're trying to build like a consumer-facing app. Okay? I don't care what it does. It doesn't matter. But you're trying to build a consumer-facing app, a mobile app. All right? All right. Now, here's what people are always asking. They're like, I need money so that I can go and build this thing. You had an idea for an app. I need money so I can go build this thing. Well, okay. What are you going to do with the money? Let's say that I give you a check. What are you going to do with this money? Well, here's my plan. I got this designer, or I'm going to hire a designer, or I'm going to hire a developer. Well, okay, do you have the designer? No. Do you have the developer? No. Do you have any semblance of the designs? No. Do you have Any idea of what the functionality is going to be? Like not just like broadly, like this is what the app's going to do in a 2-sentence write-up. I'm talking about like these are the functions of the app. This is how they connect to one another. This is what the design of the app looks like, etc., etc. All right? Do you have all of this? No. Well, then what do you have? I got an idea. Okay. Do you have customers? No. Okay. Have you talked to people about this? I've talked to a few people. I talked to my friends. They all want this app. Of course they want your app. They don't really want your app. They want to be your friend. They want you to be happy. They want to be your friend, they want you to be their friend, and they want to make you happy. And they think that by telling you that this idea is the most brilliant thing since sliced bread, that somehow that's going to make you happy. In reality, that's probably going to make you miserable, if that's what they tell you. Because what they should be telling you, even though it's kind of like, is, yeah, it's okay. Here's how you can make it better. Here's something I would actually use. I had a conversation yesterday. I'm looking to build an organization, a business of my own. I still do the entrepreneurial thing. And so I've been conceiving of this thing, and I had a lunch yesterday. And it was the first time I ever actually sat down and talked with somebody about this. And it was the last time I'm probably going to talk with them about the original idea. Not them in particular, anybody. Because the original idea sucked. Okay? I mean, it was something that I was thinking about. And I had actually talked with a few people about this, but nobody who would actually use it. And everybody was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then I talked with this person who would actually be a user or a buyer of this product. For the first time yesterday at lunch. And she didn't say it sucked. She just said, in fact, I didn't even get through telling her all about it. She's just like, I don't know about that. Like this is, here's, and she started saying some stuff, which wasn't necessarily a response to my question. But in my mind, it was like, yeah, that's much better. Like, that's kind of similar to what I was thinking about building, but that's a lot better, right? And I started conceiving of it. Now, is that validation? Yeah, maybe a little bit of the new idea, but in reality, I've got to go back to the drawing board. I've got to figure this out, all right? But that's what it takes. People who are critical of you. What is it? I read this. I read this thing. Oh, yeah. I read this, it was kind of a quote, I'll paraphrase it. I just read it like 2 days ago, although I think I've seen it many times in the past. And it said, good friends are those who talk shit to your face and say nice things behind your back. Right? That's what you want. That's what you want out of these people. You need people who are going to be critical of you. Because if you know that they're critical of you, and then you eventually stumble upon something or purposely design something that is actually fulfilling a need, and they go, wow, and those same people have been critical of you this entire time, then one of two things has happened. Either they're not your friend anymore, you've eroded their trust, or whatever it is, or, more likely, you've actually stumbled upon something which is of substance. Right? It's a value. So here's the anecdotal story about like how you can go about pitching, which relates to fundraising. Right? What you do is, I teach at the University of Houston. I don't use these things, but most of you have probably gone to college. You've probably seen these like little exam blue books, right? You've seen these things, these little blue exam books. And so what these are is, if you haven't seen them, they're lined notebooks. Like they're just small, they're thin, like they're maybe 20, 30 pages each. But they're lined pages, and then they've got these like kind of like blue color. They're actually kind of like your shirt, right? So they're like this blue color cover on them. And on the front cover, it has like a space for the name, and it has a space for like some additional information, like course section or whatever it is. What I tell people is go buy like 500 of these things. And on the very first one, take one out, and then go and talk to somebody. And go and write their name at the top. And write the number 1, and then write some contact information for them, like an email address and a phone number, something like that. Okay? And then go talk to them. Like sit down and talk to them. Right? And then ask some questions, write down your questions, write down their answers, all these sorts of things. Take good notes. And then put that one aside. You've learned a little bit from the experience. And then go take the second one. And you do the same. You write down their name. You write down the number 2, because that's the second one. And you write down the phone number and their email address, and you interview them. Ask them questions. Take notes on their responses, etc., etc. Right? You're doing this for understanding the problem, the pain point. You're not trying to come up with a solution at this point. You're just identifying the pain points. You're trying to understand what could make their life better or what is making their life worse, whatever it is. Okay? And you do this, and you go through like 300 to 500 of these things. And they're not expensive. And then you put those aside. Now you need money. No, you don't. Not yet. Because then what you do, this is all you. You can be a solo founder, and you do this. And if you've got 2 founders, you both do this. You go off, and you start... I suggest crayon, because I love crayon. Right? I suggest that you go get a big box of crayons, and use all the colors, and you design your app. Okay, don't use all the colors, because that would be a really ugly app. Right? But you take some of the crayons, and you design your app. But Neal, I don't have a technical background. Yeah, but you went to kindergarten, did you? Like, you can draw circles, and you can draw squares, and you can, like, write, hopefully legibly. Just design the app. And on the first page, design the home page. And on the second page, design the next page. And on the 18th page, design another page. And just keep doing that throughout this same blue book. Not the same blue books. Maybe you have to go buy another 100 of these or something. And you just design the app. And you show it to people after each iteration of it. After you've done the first iteration, the first blue book, you go and show it to those same 500 people and some other additional people or whatever, and you say, hey, listen, you told me that this was your problem. Does this solve your problem? Would this app solve your actual problem? Or product, or whatever it is? Would this do it for you? Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I like this, I don't like that. I don't like the design. You use too many colors, whatever it is. Okay? And you say, okay, that's okay. You take all the notes. And then you go take a second blue book, and you do the same thing. And you iterate on the design over and over and over again until you get it right. Until a bunch of people say, that looks really good. And it's all in crayon. And then what you do is when you're pitching to investors, here's what you do. You go in front of this pitch competition or whatever, and you bring in these boxes, and you bring in one box, like those big legal boxes, with all the huge legal files and everything, and you bring it with some blue books in it. And you bring a second box, and you bring it with a bunch of blue books in it. And you give your pitch. And at the end of your pitch, here's what you say. You say, here's what I've done. I need your money. And the reason I need your money is because I have validated the problem, and I have come up with a rudimentary design for the app that solves this problem. How do I know that it actually solves the problem? I don't. But I've gone as far as I can without your money. Because I don't have the money to hire a developer and hire a designer and blah, blah, blah. I don't have the money to hire this team. But I can tell you that I've gone as far as I can without your money. Here's as far as I've gone. I went in and talked to 500 people, and this is what they told me. This is what I learned at the end. This. All the stuff that I showed you in the presentation. And here, in this box over here, are the 500 responses that I got. I did 500 interviews. Now the first one, not so great. But I learned and I learned and learned. And you can come and you can talk to any of these people. And then the second thing I did, the second box over here, is a bunch of designs. And they're labeled 1 through 100. I don't know that I've gotten it right, but I've gotten it righter along the way. Now, what I'm asking from you, as an investor, is I would like for you to come and talk to me about this. and invest so that I can continue this process. I've gone as far as I can without your money. And if you say that, if you can honestly and legitimately say to an investor, there is a market for this, I've done the best I can to validate that there exists a market for this, and I have gone as far as I can without your money. I sincerely cannot take another step without funds. Then most investors will say, I'm willing to take a chance. You will have a relatively high success rate in raising funds. Now there's a lot of other stuff, like the structure of the deal and blah, blah, blah. But what you've done at that point, and you have to translate this to whatever your business is, but what you've done at that point is you've done the two key components. You validated the market, you validated the problem, you validated potentially the solution, you validated what the market looks like. You understand that 500 people is not necessarily representative of what your entire market is, but at the same time, if they're demographically sort of diverse, psychographically kind of diverse, and it's good. You've done good work in validating the market. Well, I mean, what's an investor going to say? Go talk to another 500 people? Go try another 30 times to iterate on the design? I mean, if they can say that, but they're uninterested at that point. You know that. I've said this to a large number of people. I say it to groups like this. I've said it to large crowds. But I've individually spoken with roughly 200 people, like one-on-one, and told them this. And I've tracked those 200 people. And about 15 of them have done this. I thought there was a fire.
There's supposed to be one later this afternoon, right?
Oh, is it really?
A fire?
A fire drill.
That was the warm-up.
Yeah. Scheduled for 2:27 p.m. If you go and tell this, so about 15 of them have done this. Now maybe the number's not closer to 18 now. I think about 18. Anyway, I think the numbers are all but one received substantive relationships as a consequence of their pitch when they did that turned into investment. Like, they might not have received a check on the spot, although several of them did. They might not have received a check on the spot. But all but one, and maybe that one too, I just don't know it, but all but one that I'm aware of garnered substantive relationships after a pitch like that ultimately resulted in investment. And the reason is because you've done everything you can. I mean, people who are investors in early stage businesses, they understand that these things are risky. They understand that they don't really know you, they don't necessarily, the market's new, the product and service is new, the company is new, the world's changing, all these kinds of things. They understand that there's substantial risk to an early stage business. I mean, if they don't, they have no business whatsoever in being early stage investors, period. I'm just going to say that right off the bat. If somebody comes to you and says, like, I don't know, I'm not willing to take the risk, then forget it. Walk away from the table. Right? They're not an early stage investor. Early stage investors know that at least on a one-by-one basis, there is substantial risk, financial risk associated with each investment. In all cases, every single case, there's always substantial risk. They know that. If you're like me, you say, okay, I acknowledge that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of money into a lot of things so that hopefully in the long run, I'm taking a portfolio approach and I have a diverse enough portfolio across multiple verticals and things like this that, I mean, it's not a big deal if any one of these fails, and probably a lot of them will fail, but a decent number of them will succeed, and those that do very, very well will make up for all the ones that have losses. I know that. That's not the approach that every investor takes. Some investors will take an approach that says something like, look, I'm just going to invest in a few deals, and if I lose money, I lose money. I don't do that. I don't want to lose money. So instead, I say, okay, well, I'm just going to take, I'm going to diversify, I'm going to take a diverse portfolio approach, and that's how I'm going to, not insure, because there's no guarantee, but mitigate my broader financial risk. Yeah.
So you said that most entrepreneurs aren't ready to take money.
Yeah.
Do I tie that directly to what you said, like they don't have a plan of what to do with it, or does that mean something else?
No, I think that my intent there is to say that they're not ready to take the money. That they don't have know what to do with it. They don't have the plan in place or whatever it happens to be. And plans, to me, is that outside? Yeah. To me, what that means is this. There are kind of, is there a marker here somewhere? Like a dry erase marker?
Some in the other room in the conference room.
Oh, thanks. I'll say this. She's bringing the markers. Thank you, ma'am. So, the way that I kind of think about this is there's this structure of there's let's see, tactics, and then there's operations. So the way that I tell people about this is I'm sorry, drop this one. So do you want to come over here? This is sort of the why of what you're doing in the context of this structure. This is sort of the what of what you're doing. This is the how of what you're doing, and this is the who, the when, and the where of what you're doing. Okay? So to answer your question, what I would say is this. You should at least have all of this. You should have all of that ready to go for how you're going to use the funds. You should know exactly why you're doing what you're doing in terms of the organization, the company's vision, and such like this. You should know what you're going to do, like in both the near term and the long term. You should know how you're going to go about doing it. And then you should have some of this. Like you don't necessarily know everything about it. You don't know exactly how you're going to execute, but you know generally what you're going to do. Okay? So you should have all of this and some of that in place before you ask for money. With regard to the money. And this is actually, I'm just going to just segue into something else here just for a moment. With regard to the money that you're asking for, and also, and this is what I tell people all the time, is you should also know what you're going to do with the next round of money. At least with regard to these things here. You should know those things for both the current round and the next round, and you should know these things for at least the current round. Okay? Because, I mean, you don't necessarily know these things for the next round. But another thing about raising money, and this is just a quick segue, we can talk about it a little more, is if you're trying to figure stuff out for how you're raising the money now, like the current round that you're raising, if you're trying to figure that out, you're too late. This doesn't necessarily work particularly well for like the very first round. But the point is that as you're actually raising the current round, you should be planning your next round. And so let's go back to the conversation that we had about smart money. Another thing that's very important with regard to finding the right investors is finding the investors that have connections also to the next round of funding. That's particularly important. Otherwise, you're just going to be founders who do this, who do what I'm now suggesting, spend approximately 10 to 15% of their time raising money. If you are good at raising money, and what good at raising money means is that you're as you're actively executing the current round, you have planned out the next round. Okay? If you do that, you will spend about 10 to 15% of your time raising money throughout the first few stages of your business, the first few rounds of fundraising. If you do not do that, you will spend between 30 and 45% of your time raising money. If you're smart about it, and you're getting the right investors up front, then they will be able to make the connections to the later round of investors. Now, that's not the only way smart money can work. Smart money can also mean, again, they have substantial market knowledge or whatever else, all the things that we talked about. But that's one facet of smart money. People who have connections to the next round. So if you're raising money from angels, for example, then those angels will have connections to super angels or early stage VCs or something like that. The early stage VCs will have connections to later stage VCs. The later stage VCs might have access to private equity money or something like this, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, it goes on. But that's an important facet of raising funds. You should be able to make those connections, because otherwise you're just going to be spending so much time as the founder of a business. You're going to be spending so much time trying to raise money, not just now, but for years to come. It's a huge time sink, and you can minimize that. You can optimize your time by being smart about it. But that gets to
So I'm being told by a lot of my advisors to expect like 60% of my time to raise money.
I think that's excessive. I think that's excessive. Now, it may be the case that you might be spending a lot of time doing stuff that helps you raise money, so things like planning the business and strategy and these sorts of things, and maybe they're including all of that, because that is also important and substantive for raising money. But I also think that it's also core to the business, and I don't consider that. But if you're spending 60%, there might be times when you're spending 60% of your time.
Right.
There might be like a month where you're spending 60% of your time or something like that. But yeah, if you're spending 60% of your overall time raising money for the next 3 years, then you might as well shut down your business, as far as I'm concerned. Either that or you get a dedicated fundraising officer. You bring somebody in who that's their job. They're gonna. Your job as a principal founder or something like this might still be to spend that time, having these meetings and talking with people and organizing things. But a lot of the kind of operational stuff that needs to be done may require another person. Something like that. That's what I would say. That seems expensive. That's excessive. I would say that it's probably typical. It's about 30-35% for and I will tell you this. I don't have evidence of this, but what I've observed anecdotally is that if a founder is spending massive amounts of time on fundraising, then the probability of their success in fundraising probably goes down, because they're doing something wrong. They're just running on a treadmill. That's it. I think that's the case. Yeah.
What if you have all that and the main response is, well, we're going to wait to see what kind of traction you get?
Then they're the wrong investor for you. If you don't have the traction, then they're the wrong investor for you. They're probably the wrong level or the wrong stage investor for you, period. And so this is actually something I wanted to say, and I will say it, and now I'm going to do it. So you need to be able to walk away from the table. I've said that several times, but I'm going to tell you what that means. It literally means walking away from the table. It means if you're 5 minutes into a conversation and you get a bad feeling about it, this is just a waste. You say your thank yous. I think that we're too early for you, for example, in that case, or maybe we're the wrong market for you, maybe the wrong business model for you, whatever it happens to be, and you say, don't want to waste your time, don't want to waste ours, thank you for your time. If we move in the direction of your investment thesis or something like this, then we will then I'd like to maintain the relationship and sort of come back at another time. Yeah.
So when that question comes up then, should I just, my response be like, well, thanks for your time. I'd like to continue this maybe later.
Yeah, I mean, that
immediately?
yeah, I mean, sure, why not? Because look, if somebody's saying that, what you do is you say, look, we don't have market traction. Just so we're clear, I mean, you want to clarify, right? We do not have market traction. This is the validation that we've achieved so far. These are our achievements as a business so far, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Is that substantive enough for you to consider us for investment? Right? And if the answer is no, I think we need then that's when you just kind of stand up and you say thank you. Right? I mean, be nice about it. Like, you don't want to burn bridges or whatever, but you don't want to. Like, don't waste your time. Have pride. No, I'm serious. Like just, this is something that, it's like this, right? How many of you have kids? Okay, a good number of you. And those of you who don't have kids can probably still answer this question. All right? Let's say, for example, that you went to a store and you were buying kids, not buying kids, you were buying kids diapers, and you were buying diapers for your kids, okay? So you go to the store, and you buy some diapers for like your baby, okay, your infant. And you go up, and you're like, and you walk into the store, they're like, hi, can I help you? And you're like, yeah, do you have diapers? Yes, we have diapers. Okay, by the way, your baby's really ugly. Right? Now, do you want to, I just wanted to let you know, your baby's really ugly, right? Like, maybe with a bit of makeup or something like this, your baby could look better, right? Or something like that, right? Now, there are plenty of stores that you can go buy diapers. You need diapers, right? But there are plenty of stores at which you can buy diapers. Not kids. Diapers. So you would leave the store, right? Right? I mean, you would probably do something like that. Don't hang around. Don't waste your time. If they don't want to sell you diapers, then, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to say something like, well, I don't know if it's perfectly reasonable to say something about your kid, but let's say it's perfectly reasonable to say, there are legitimate critiques about your business. But it's a question of matching. So if you don't match, maybe you'll match in the future, but if you don't match now, why waste your time? There are plenty of investors in the world. In fact, there are more investors than there are investors. What the heck do I mean by that? What the heck do I mean by that? I mean that there are people who are not investors. They're not actually investors. They've never invested in anything in their life. I mean, they might have invested in Exxon or something like this, but they have never invested in an early stage startup. But they are qualified to do so. They're accredited investors per the SEC guidelines. And they might be willing to consider an investment if you can present it to them well. Right? So that's what I mean by there are more investors than investors. There are plenty of people out there. Your job isn't to go and find an investor. Your job is to find the right investor. I understand that for a lot of you, it's like, I need the money. Right? But you don't need money. You need the money. Because believe me, if you screw this up now, in the early stages, A, you won't learn anything, so you'll continue screwing it up, and B, you'll probably mess it up for your business, or there's a chance that you might mess it up for your business in terms of you building a relationship with the wrong investor up front. That can substantially cripple your business going forward. So you need to think very carefully about who it is that you're going after. And you need to, before you do any of that, and that's just the point, is that you position yourself so that you're attractive. Right? I mean, dress up your baby a little bit before you go to the store. Right? You had a question? Or somebody else?
I did. First, this is great, so thank you. Second, for everybody else, you can get the exam books, 100 of them for $30 on Amazon.
Are you the one who said that to me?
No.
Oh, somebody else said
Awesome.
No. For $35?
$30 for 100.
Okay, so I've been saying 25 cents for each, so I guess it's a little bit more than that, but that's cool. Thank you for saying
But
that.
my question is, okay, so you've done your, let's say we've done our exam books, we've done all this, and let's just for argument purposes, it's perfect. Where do we go find these investors to start finding the right one to match?
Well, so the first thing is that you can go, so at the early stage, you typically are going to go after angel investment.
Right.
So one way of starting with that is that you can go to like your rich uncle or something like this. Okay, so you could say, you could go to somebody who you know personally or you have a connection to at least, and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what I'm building, this is where I'm at, things like this. Is this something that you might be interested in investing in? I don't know if you do this kind of investment or maybe you'd consider it or something like that. So for most people, that's what's often referred to as a friends and family round. For investors, that's usually referred to as an F3 round. A friends, families, and fools round. So you go after that kind of money. That's the very first level of investment. You have to be careful that you don't run awry of rules and regulations. You can take money from anybody, but if you take money from anybody who is not an accredited investor and who doesn't fall under certain other distinct categories with certain types of investment, then there are reporting rules that can really bog down your business from an accounting perspective in the future, okay, and a legal perspective in the future. But that doesn't mean you'll be in trouble or they'll be in trouble. It takes more rules. There's more work to be done. Secondly, you want to go after angel investors. So in every single major urban area in the United States and most around the world, there are angel groups. Some are more substantive than others, but there are angel groups. You can just go find one of these angel groups. Okay, different angel groups work differently. So, for example, there might be an angel group that actually pools, like everybody invests. I'm making up a number here. I don't know what the numbers are, but let's say that like there's like 100 people, each of whom puts $25,000 in, and then there's somebody who manages that. So it's kind of more like a venture capital kind of deal. So there's something like that. Most angel groups that I'm aware of, though, are every angel is like a member. They pay a small fee or something like this to be a member. It's kind of a social club, but at the same time, they get access to the deals, and they make individual decisions on what they're going to invest in, right? And there are probably angel groups. There are probably angels in angel groups that have never invested in anything. They've been members for 5 years and they don't invest in anything, right? For them it's a social club. They pay $1,000 a year or something like this to be a part of the social club. That's it. So you can go after angel groups. You can also go and you can go onto things like angel lists and such like this, and you might be able to find individual angel investors that live in or around your area. Okay. You can also talk to other businesses in the area, like startups in the area, that have been at least somewhat successful in finding funding, especially in your area of your market or vertical or your area of expertise, whatever it happens to be. You can go talk to them and say, look, do you know of any angels that might be interested in something like this? Right? And then lastly, you can, I think this is too late, I think that you all are too early for this, but you can start going after venture capital. So there are some early stage venture capital firms out there. For those of you who are women, so I see 4 of you in the room. For example, there's True Wealth Ventures, which is Austin-based, Carrie and Sarah. So they sometimes do early stage investment and into women founded businesses. So you can do something like that. Let's see, that's in Austin. I know not everybody's from Austin. So you can go and find maybe an early stage venture capital group or something like this. Sometimes early stage venture capital groups they typically might put in several $100,000 or even up to $1 million or $2 million into a deal, but they might be willing to put a smaller amount of money as what's called a tracking fund. Basically, it's their way of just putting a little bit of money and then just receiving your updates and kind of watching you. For them, it's not a substantial amount of money. They do this as more of a portfolio approach across multiple businesses in order to maintain a relationship, and then later on they might put in more money. If you make good progress, something like that. So those are kind of something. As far as angel groups in Austin are concerned, there are a couple, but I think the most prominent one is CTN, which is over at, I think, they're based in Capital Factory, I think. They're based in Capital Factory.
So one of the things that we hear a lot is that Austin is just so small that the funds are small, and so they're looking for a lot more traction, like almost, a couple $1 million in revenue.
Yeah, so that may be the case, I don't know.
Oh, okay. So my question was, do you feel like we need to go outside of Austin to raise money?
I think you should go anywhere and everywhere that you can to raise money,
Okay.
as long as you're getting smart money, and you're willing to, like, you shouldn't go to Denver for money unless you are willing to potentially move to Denver. That doesn't mean that that's a requirement of receiving those funds, but in a lot of cases, angel groups and especially VCs would like to invest in companies if they're the principal investor in that deal or in that round, where the business has some major operations or is headquartered nearby, something like that. So one thing to be said about that though is going back to the CTAN route, for example. So the CTAN belongs to a group of about 20, I think, or so angel groups around the state. They're called the Alliance of Texas Angel Networks. If again, there's no guarantee of transference or sharing of deals or syndication of deals. But if you can garner investment in one, like you can garner substantial investment in one, then sometimes they'll be able to syndicate. Like even if they can't fill out the deal or something like this, they might be willing to farm out the rest. So if you're raising, I'm making up a number, but let's say that you're raising $300,000, okay? And let's say that you can get 150 of that from CTAN members. You might be able to get the other 150 from other ATAN members, like members of other ATAN groups, for example. So there are other ways of going about this. Those are through syndications and stuff like that. So that's a very strong network. ATAN is so going in Austin on the CTAN route, or going in Houston. There's HAN, the Houston Angel Network, et cetera, et cetera. But they all belong to the same underlying network. Yeah. So then they share deals.
Have you raised money through them before?
I have not personally, like for one of my deals,
Yeah.
but I have. But like companies I've invested in have. Yeah. But here's the other thing is that if you're talking with this goes back to the other question before. If you're talking with people and they're like, we need to see more traction, or we need to see more revenue, or something like this, then they're just the wrong investors, right? And so that doesn't mean that going to that angel group like CTAN is the wrong place to be. Right. It just means that you're talking with the wrong investor, the wrong member there, right? And maybe the right member doesn't exist there, but you should at least, the next step I think beyond that is to try, maybe to talk with like the managing director or something like this and say, look, this person is telling me this, right? We're not there. We're a very early stage investment. This person's obviously not comfortable with like that type of investment, but maybe there are other people within the network. Or you can even talk to that person and say, look, I'd love to be able to bring you in on the deal, but we're not where you need us to be. Are there other people who tend to take higher risk with earlier stage kind of market validation, but not sort of revenue generation or something like that? Okay. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any non-obvious red flags about when you should walk away from an investor?
I mean,
anything like
to me they're all obvious. So I mean, I would say that I don't know about non-obvious red flags. It may be the case that are we out of time? Mm-hmm. We need to stop.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we have our next speaker here.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So let me just answer this real quick. So I mean, here's what it fundamentally comes down to. This is an obvious thing, but it's not obvious how to necessarily handle how to identify it. So I don't know how a good answer to your question, but if you just get a bad vibe, right? It's just not a good fit. It's not a good match. Like they're asking like questions that just seem kind of out of whack, or their requirements seem out of whack, or something like this, or they're just not aligned with where you're at. They just, in my mind, that those are the kinds of things, right? I mean, there are other things that I would consider more obvious, but are certainly far less likely. Things like, a lot of times the guy might be just a complete asshole, right? Like, and if that's the case, that you want to walk away from, it doesn't matter how smart the person is, how knowledgeable about your market they are, how much money they might be willing to put in, none of this matters. You don't want to work with assholes, right? So if you just personally get a bad vibe, or as a founder / representative of your business, you get a bad vibe, and it could be anything. It could be something like a bad vibe, like bad energy in the room or something like this, or it could be something like, look, it's just not really a good fit. Then, in my mind, those are just deal killers. You just walk away from the deal. Okay.
Just real quick, I have one that's like a guy. He owns a services organization, and he wants to tie like a small piece. So like 12% of the money he's going to give me, he wants back as like a services offering. Is that a red flag, or is that normal?
There are quite a few investors who do that. You've got to make a tactical and strategic decision as to whether or not that's an alignment that you really think would be in your best interest. If the person is asking for all their money back, then yeah. If the person is asking for like 12%, I don't know, maybe. That's not, if you need the service and you're not overpaying for it, and they're a good service provider, then maybe that's not such a bad deal. That's, if like I said, if you need the service, so, if you're going to pay for it anyway, and that's roughly what you're going to pay, you might as well, right? But the one thing about that is that I think that you want to make sure that you separate the vendor relationship from the investor relationship from any advisory relationship. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You really need to put up some firewalls between all of those roles. All right. Just a lot of tips and hints and things like this. I hope I answered some questions, good questions. Anything else before we go?
I don't think I need money.
Okay. Then don't take money.
I was hearing that. Thanks.
If you don't think you need money, then ensure that you need money before you take it, because
It's going to be painful, but I think I'm going to get there.
Again, so here's what I'm hearing from you. I want to translate it to what I said before, is that you have not gone as far as you need, as far as you can, without needing the money. Does that make sense? That's what I'm hearing.
Yes.
So therefore, I would say that you shouldn't get the money.
It's going to be painful, but okay.
That
makes sense.
Or another way of doing it is you can structure it a slightly different way. Or another way of doing it is that here's something that most people don't think of. I'm going to end with this. Most people don't think of you could just go get a bank loan. Not in all cases, not for growth venture kind of capital businesses or something like this, but for some types of businesses and people, equity financing is so, what was the right word here? Ubiquitous now within the context of sort of the startup realm, that everybody forgets that there are these things called banks and they give out loans. Right? So something like that might work. I'm not saying it's work for you or your business or anything like this, but there are other financing means that can help alleviate stress or financial stress or whatever it happens to be, that'll help you without having to take a massive amount of capital from an equity investor. So, if you want to talk about that more, we can talk about that more. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.